This is WBAI in New York City.
And this is Ramdas. And here we are.
And there's the ringing of the Dharma.
Hello, this is BAI and you're on the air.
Hello, Baba?
Yes.
I wish you could help us try to work through what is, I'm sure, troubling many people, not just us. My husband and I both practice Hatha Yoga because we know it's good for our bodies. We feel it. And Karma Yoga we learned from our parents when we were little kids. You know, right action and good deeds. But you talk about no desire, no attachment. And what do you do when you have little kids and you're in the world and you know their teeth hurt, so you have to get them to a good dentist, and your little boy says, Mom, I'd love a bicycle, and your little girl maybe wants to play some kind of music, and so she wants some kind of an instrument and lessons which cost money. And then you try to get Hatha Yoga lessons, or you try to go to a lecture by a yogi, and you have to pay $2.50 or $3 because they don't let you in free. So how do you fight the desire, which comes with having to earn money and be in the world, and the attachment to these kids who you know as a psychologist need this attachment, without which they couldn't survive, and which is, in many senses, a very healthy kind of thing. I'm not talking about neurotic attachment, I'm talking about the loving attachment. How do you work that through? I mean, if you're alone, if you can live in a little hut in the woods as you do, or as you've spoken about, then I can see that. I can see eating alone. But you know, the only time you get to see your children when you work is at the table. And you have to talk. It's the most important time. If you don't talk and you want some quiet because you're tired from working, the kids cry and say, you don't talk to us. So what do you do then about working through living in the world, living with children whom you love and who love you and need you, who are very young creatures and dependent on you, and still pursue this path?
You're a beautiful being, and I hear you perfectly.
No, I love you. I mean, you know, another thing I would like you to help me with, too, and that is some kind of belief in God, because I lost that, having been brought up as you must have been in a Jewish household. I lost that at 13 when I saw all the injustice and the cruelty and you say love both sides, you know. But somehow I find also that very difficult, and that my friends share. I'm a psychologist, too, and my friends who are mostly psychologists and social workers share the same dilemma. We can't believe in this God you talk about and read about intellectually, and it makes it very rough emotionally. Now, how do you talk to me for a little while?
Okay.
Or talk to us.
We will talk to us for a little while. In regard to your first question, each person has his own dharma. That means his own specific path that is the optimum path to bring him to the greatest degree of consciousness or harmony or closeness, if you will, to the law, the divine law. And the Dharma is a function, that Dharma or your practice is a function in much large part of your karmic predicament. That is, what are the givens in your situation? And the Bhagavad Gita makes it very clear that to do another's dharma is adharmic. That means it's against the dharma. You have to find your own path. You can't do another's path. I often talk about my path, not with the implication that anybody else should do what I do, but rather merely to give an example of what one of us is doing. And that's why when I write about it, it's called Our Story. It's just another chapter of our story. Now, you have the existing situation that you have a family, and you also are concerned with your own consciousness and the awakening consciousness, and how do these two go together? Well, to the extent that you walk away from your existing responsibilities, that is the best way that you understand to allow your child to grow humanly, beautifully, consciously, and freely, and the way of providing sustenance, loving sustenance for your partner, and the way also of fulfilling your inner work in yourself and working within your community and fulfilling all of your roles, is to listen to all of these forces and to find your path through, doing each act fully as an offering. That is, the rearing of your child becomes your offering, and the serving of your husband or your wife becomes your offering, and the role in the community is your offering, And the work on your own body and through Hatha Yoga and on your own mind through meditation is your offering. And each of these becomes a formal part of your sadhana. And only for the fellow that was asking on the phone was the optimum strategy to be silent and eat alone at meals. For a householder who has young children, that would not be the optimum strategy. If you listen in your own heart, you begin to hear what is the optimum strategy, what is your dharma. You try something on it doesn't feel quite right. You try something else on it does. So I think that the child's bicycle, the fixing of the teeth, and the paying to come to a lecture, all are the use of right livelihood, because you make enough money to maintain your body and to fulfill your responsibilities at every level, that is, in your family, community, nation, world. And to earn money to fulfill your role as a parent and also to fulfill your role as a spiritual being in a community, spiritual community, all feels just right to me. The key part of being with children or being with any human being is to work on yourself enough to find the place in you where you are love, where you can feel your own, if you will, divinity, or if that's too hard a word, just your own pureness or your own quietness. And then look for that and relate to that in your child. And the less you get lost in the child's personality, that's hard for you as a psychologist, the less you get lost in the child's melodrama of life, doing it, serving, being perfect in every part of your role as a mother or your husband's role as a father, but at the same moment realizing that you're meeting another being who is full and complete just the way they are. And that allows the child to grow itself. I think we have a lot to learn, and I'm one of the first to admit it, having been a child psychologist for many years, that we have a lot to learn about how to allow a child to grow itself. And that has a lot to do with the work we need to do in ourselves. Second question about your feelings about God. It's true that many of us came through religious experiences which were almost ostentatiously lacking in the spirit. That is, all the forms were there, but the living spirit wasn't. There's a beautiful expression. I think it comes, I'm not sure who it comes from, maybe from the Sikhs, I'm not sure. They say that for a church to have the spirit in it, or a temple, people have to invest it with the spirit. And it's interesting that it's what you bring to your religious service that is what invests the spirit. Grace is experienced as a function of your own openness to it. It's always there, but you may never experience it because you're never open to it. And so that without getting caught in words like God, because of your past experience, it may take you a long time, you find the writings of those beings who are most comfortable and compatible with you. Any of these may be your route through intellectually into a deeper understanding of the divine laws. That's what the Talmud was about. It's about the divine laws, which is in a way the way God is made manifest. So I don't think you have to jump in. You may not find that the bhakti route, the route of talking about God and talking about the Divine Mother and just loving God and loving gurus and all that, that may not be your route because of your previous training. Find your own route. Listen very carefully to find your own route and then work with it. And as you get on with your own route, it opens your way to all the other routes. So you don't have to put anything down. You just have to find what's up for you. Then all the rest comes up later. You don't have to decide God isn't. You just have to say, God isn't my route, and you can work on the route of awakening consciousness, awakening purity, awakening love, all of these, and you never have to use the word God at all.
I must say to you,
yeah,
every word you said is what I think, and exactly how I felt all along.
Okay.
Good man.
Good night.
Shalom.
Hello?
Hello, Ramdas.
Yes.
My question is, how do you listen to your dharma, and also how do you live in harmony with your karma? Sometimes it gets a little difficult, especially being in New York, and earning a living, working, trying to follow a spiritual path, and sometimes it gets a little difficult to feel what's happening inside you and to listen to it and to act in accordance with it.
I hear you perfectly. It's incredibly difficult. I understand that. The hearing of the Dharma, the way I'm working with it, and that's all I can do is share with you the way I'm doing it, because I'm trying now to live very much in the marketplace also, as you are, and do the work on myself. The hearing of the Dharma is a method of approximation, is what I'd call it. And it's a method of feedback and approximation. That is, you hear what seems to be at the moment the next step at this moment. You start it, and it either feels right or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you hear inside, no, it's not right, and you pull back, or you start to steer a little direction differently. You go to one teaching, feels right on, and you go on with it. You go to another, everybody says it's wonderful, but you go there, it doesn't feel right to you, so you pull back. You start to suppress a desire, control a desire, and you see it's premature to try to stop it. All you can do is watch it for a while. So you stop trying to stop it, and you just watch it more consciously. Another one, you're watching because you sort of want to keep on with it, and you know you're really ready to stop it, and you have to keep developing this kind of honesty with yourself, and all of the inner voices are many voices. Some of them are your ego voices, which are coming on as if they are your higher thing, but there is a place in us that knows. That's what's very aggravating at times. And that place you've just got to keep toying with. It's like Krishna Prem talks about it as the still small voice, when all about it are the trumpets of our desires. And you can hardly hear it because of the loudness of all of the other voices in us that are talking. But by reading, for example, constantly, like I constantly am reading from just hundreds of holy books that I just keep around me and keep picking up, or have in the car and read a paragraph or a little phrase or something. And these are constantly strengthening my connection to that inner voice. When I'm reading Buddha's words or Christ's words, or some of the words may be a little off from where my inner voice is telling me, but that's okay. I just listen. Some of them I'm ready for, some of them I'm not. But I'm constantly reading this stuff to just keep aligning me to that inner voice so that I can hear it better and better. And I'm constantly remembering these little things like love everyone, serve everyone, remember God, these kinds of things. And these are keeping me in tune. So it's this kind of gentle method of approximation. And if you don't get panicked when you go off center, it's cool, because you come back again, because you can only get off so far before you feel your own dishonesty or hypocrisy or attachment or caughtness. And I really think that we can trust ourselves more than we do. I think our inner message is really strong. And I think even in the midst of this fantastic vibrational field of Shiva City that we're living in here. Can you hear all that?
Yes, but you mentioned about getting off center, which happens because there'd be like 2 or 3 directions that I'd be pulling in. All seem to feel right.
Well, let me say something to you that's very reassuring. It doesn't matter. See, that's what's really fierce, because the inner work is going on in you independent of the external forms it's taking, so that whatever form you end up in, you will bring to that whatever consciousness you have. And no matter how fancy the form is, if you're not conscious, you'll do it in a worldly way, while a worldly thing you'll do in a conscious way. So that really it ends up, it's like the story of the 2 guys that are trying to decide whether to go to a temple or a whorehouse, and one of them decides to go to a temple, and the other decides to go to the whorehouse. And the guy that goes to the whorehouse spends all his time thinking about the temple, and the guy at the temple spends all his time thinking about the whorehouse. Now, which of them got more of a spiritual experience out of it? Because it turns out not to be which form, but what you bring to the form. So the best game is to sort of just relax a lot and do the best you can, and then see that it doesn't matter, that you're being taken through, and that whichever one you end up with is just the one you need to work with at that moment. The best thing is really to relax a lot into this trip, not get into the panic you're going to go under. That's what I'm saying to you. You don't go under. You go under for a moment, and you come back up again. Okay?
Yes.
Good night. Hello? Hey.
Did you say anything about the Hare Krishna movement?
What does that mean? What's the question? I hear it, but I don't understand what you're asking.
I've come out of that fairly recently, about a year's experience with it.
Right.
And now I'm back into the world again.
Right.
Looking for my work.
Right.
And the work I see now is in the garden.
The work you see now is in the garden?
Yeah. And
Right.
That's the work I do, but,
Right.
but I feel like I need to do something also in a larger sense. And I am used to a structure which I no longer have because I've left it.
Right.
But I'm looking for something.
I hear all that. I think that these transitions are very, very delicate to make. That at a certain point you need that, as you put it, that structure. And the structure of ashram, the structure of regular formal satsang. And then you start to feel at a certain point that that isn't the optimum thing for you at that moment in relation to your sadhana. And but any of these transitions are really hard because of the degree of investment you make in each of them to make it work. Traditionally, and I'm sure it will continue to be so, there is a tremendous need for these kind of closed environments that are very intense in sadhana for people at certain stages. And I think that the effects of it on you over time will become more apparent, and you've got to give it a lot of time before you understand how different aspects of your sadhana have fed into your present growth. Too short-term reactions, you'll see later it all meant something different than you thought. And really, if you just keep listening now and be very patient with a period of transition when it's all a little bit confusing, and listen until you get a real hit that the next thing is the right thing for you. It's enough now to work in your garden and do it purely, and every human being you meet them with love, and meet them in service. And that process, see, you've got the idea of big things and little things, but actually everything that you do is the same quality. It's all part of the total design of the universe that you're participating in. And that thing in your head is what is you're attached to at the moment, is your model of what you think is, quote, important work. And actually any work you're doing must be done the same as any other work, which is as an offering and in love. Can you hear that? Yeah. And wait and be patient and let the other things emerge. And if you still need satsang, find other groups of people with whom you can meditate, with whom you can sing kirtan, with whom you can live, in order to help each other. Because most people are not part of formal movements, and they are doing it the other way, which is creating their own satsang and their own forms and rituals. Because while in some ways it's very useful in this stage to bring over and transmit the pure rituals that have been useful in changing consciousness in other cultures, slowly as we all get it more together, we will evolve our own rituals and our own mantras and our own songs and our own style of dress and our own ways of being conscious together. And then I think that the meaning of these various movements will change. And I think that you will find some form in your daily life, in relation to your daily life, that will be a harmonious sadhana for you to do. Okay?
Right.
Good night.
Good night.
Hello, Rhonda. Could you give me help in some way to burn out desires of like getting high, smoking grass, smoking cigarettes, drinking beer. When you start seeing through it that it doesn't get you high anymore, but you still go back and fall into it, it starts getting very depressing. Could you give me help in some way?
Yeah, I hear all that. Okay, I'll try. You have to expect that there is going to be a long period between the first awakening to your predicament and the time when all of the desires have lost their power to take you over. During this period, you're going to go through incredible numbers of ups and downs. You're going to feel you've lost it. It's like watching a boat out on the horizon going under the waves and coming back up and going under. You'll feel like you're just touching it. You're seeing it perfectly, and then the next moment it'll be gone and you're back lost in your desires. Every one of us is facing exactly the same thing. And as you get rid of the grosser ones, the more subtle ones take over. And this battle goes right, this is the battle of the Bhagavad Gita. It goes right on till the end. Now the game is to not get so caught in being finished, but rather be involved with the experience of the whole process. That is, treat the lows as well as the highs as part of the teaching that's happening to you. That is, when you've just said, I'm giving up smoking, and then you suddenly find a cigarette in your hand. Okay? The first thing you do is you get very irritated with yourself. That's just more of your ego melodrama and more of the ways the ego maintains itself through what's called the superego. And then behind all that, there's a voice in you that's just watching. It's saying, there you are smoking again. There you are putting yourself down for smoking. Just the witness, it's called. And pretty soon, more and more, that witness takes over until almost all the time you're just sitting inside watching yourself go through all of these dramas of deciding to give something up impurely, unfortunately, because you're not ready. You don't decide to give things up. They fall away. That's the secret of it. All you do is keep your consciousness as much as you can directed towards the highest state of consciousness or godness that you can conceive of. And then all this stuff will keep changing. Every time you go under, notice how upset you get about going under. That's part of the process. That's the fire that's purifying you. And if you can just flip it over so you start to dig your falling as well as you're getting up, that's what's known as honoring Shiva, you see. Honoring the forces in you that are still stronger than the force for you to awaken. So pretty soon you just stop desiring, even desiring to get done desiring. You just allow God to manifest the way He manifests. You keep honoring Him in all the forms that He shows Himself through your body and through your mind. And at the same moment you keep calming your mind, opening your heart, and keeping your head in as high a state of consciousness as you can, just because there's nothing else you can do. And then it takes its natural course. You just get more patient and relax more. Can you hear all that?
Hello?
Can you hear all that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Is that any use to you?
It's news. I know it. But the thing is, it just doesn't, I guess I want the fire to be more intense to get rid of them.
Yeah, well, that's the greed. See, that's the greed for the high still. And you got to dig, like, every time you take a cigarette... Every time you take a cigarette or you take a joint or whatever, take a drink, just do it as consciously as you possibly can. Offer it just the same way as you offer food. Offer it to God, offer the cigarette to God, and then smoke it as consciously. Watch yourself smoke it, watch yourself puff each puff.
That would help.
Experience the thing. Just bring as much consciousness to bear with every one of the acts, whether or not it's an act you like or you don't like. Okay?
Okay.
Fine, try all that and call me back.
Okay, thank you.
This is a do-it-yourself kid. Hello?
Hello. I've been kind of working with something for a year. Like, I've been into this whole thing, and I've been, really thinking of it constantly, and it's constantly with me. And more than anything else, I've found that I have this terrific problem with whenever I do anything, like choose between two alternatives for the sake of, quote, kind of getting high or trying to, I find that, I'm aware constantly of my ego kind of standing there going, wow, look at you, isn't that fantastic? And this constantly comes up, again and again and again between me and anything I'm doing. And, of course it comes up with meditating also. I mean, the other person talked to, and, he was kind of afraid of losing his ego, and I find that whatever I do, no matter how close I get to anything, I can't lose my ego, and I'm always aware of it standing there, and I'm always aware of how impure I am.
Right. Okay. Don't try to lose it. Just keep doing the positive thing, doing the meditation, doing the karma yoga, doing the kirtan, and let it do its trip, and notice it, and allow it to be. The more you push it away, the more it holds on, the more you get freaked by it. Every time you get freaked by it, you're just feeding it. The game is, it hangs on for a long time, especially every time you get high, you say, wow, look at how good I am. My meditation's really working. There's a myriad of ways. The ego is so exquisitely subtle in the way it hangs on. And all you can do is honor its exquisiteness. It's absolutely a mind-blower as to how good it is. It's kept you going for all this time, and most people through their entire lives. So, rather than try to push it away, or every time you get freaked, just witness the freak rather than getting lost in it. Can you hear all that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I dig the predicament. It happens to all of us. For a long period of time, I could never figure out when I would do an act whether I was doing it out of my ego or whether I was doing it out of a pure motivation. And then I got to the stage where I didn't care anymore. I did it because I was doing it, and whatever it was, it was. And then it started to change. Only when I got sort of fed up with being freaked about my ego and sort of relaxed a little bit. See, we get into this thing that we've got to get holy so quick. And you can just relax a little bit, And if you're on an ego trip, okay, don't worry. God's bringing you through. You don't have to do it so hard. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay?
One more quick question.
Okay, one more quick question.
I'm consistently faced with my ego staring me in the face. I've gone from working in professional radio to doing sound in a rock club, that kind of thing. Always consistently faced with a ego presence kind of situation, and even when I'm trying to be selfless as possible because of my position, people around me accuse me of ego. I've been working with mantra. If somebody compliments me, I'll fall into my mantra again. Is there anything else you can suggest?
Oh man, you're right on. It's beautiful. This is a very, very slow process that we're going through. This process of getting into a completely selfless space of just pure action with no doer doing it. And the ego keeps cropping up in incredible numbers of ways, and there's a tremendous amount of patience and compassion you need. And that kind of patience and compassion is constantly divesting the ego of its power, because it tries to constantly get you into emotional reactions over the fact that it's around all the time, which is just more ego, of course. And even the trying to get rid of ego is ego.
Right.
So that I really dig that the mantra is perfectly used under those conditions.
I keep trying to fall back and back into the mantra.
I understand. We all do.
What do you think of the Gestalt therapy?
Every therapy is as high as the therapist is. And to the extent that the therapist is a conscious being, Gestalt therapy can be useful. To the extent that it's somebody who feels that personality is the only real way of understanding the universe, that's that real, then it's just sucking you in deeper into the trap. And so most therapies are very useful if you're using them in a context of consciousness. And if you're not, they just take you deeper into the mire.
Right. I was thinking of like I'm very into doing something.
Yeah, I hear you are very into doing something.
Yeah, well, can't help it. That's where I'm at. But, and so I was thinking of, like, doing it because it seems to be a way to get...
If you want to clean away, it's like fender repair. If you want to clean away some personality stuff, it's cool.
No, not doing it like undergoing it.
Yeah.
Doing it.
Oh, doing it.
Yeah, doing
Being a Gestalt therapist.
it. Yeah.
Right, well...
It's kind of transmitting the here and now thing.
Well, if you're working on yourself full-time, then you can use whatever form feels right to you. You can be a Gestalt therapist or a shoemaker, and it really won't make much difference. Because you transmit your being. And if you feel that Gestalt therapy is right on for you, go ahead and become a Gestalt therapist. It'll be always just as high as you are.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well. It's BAI, you're on the air.
I'd like to speak to you during one of the music interludes.
Well, you don't think all of us can share it?
It's something that I don't think I can talk about over the radio.
Ah, that's interesting.
It means that I hold on, right?
Yeah, hold on and see what happens.
Okay.
Fine.
Thank you.
It's an interesting thing about what we can share or not with each other and what we call with the listening, because there's only us here, you know, really. And it's far out that you can tell one person and not another. I've been learning about that there's a beautiful Sikh saying that when you know God knows everything, you're free. That is, when you realize that everything in you is already available to he who knows, then you see you really have nothing that private at all, even though you thought you did. And the more you can see everybody as us, the more that whole business, like there's nothing really other than what the laws prohibit me saying over the air. There's nothing I can't say at this point over the radio about my life or anything else I can think of or that comes up. Because I don't really think I see that aspect of who's listening as them, but rather as more of us. And it's like you go home at the end of the day and you sit down, you take off your shoes and you loosen your tie and you put your feet up and you put your wallet out on the table or your pocketbook down. And you're home, and you feel safe, and you're just, here we are, it's just us. And that's sort of a place in the non-material realm of consciousness that I like to live in all the time. But I can understand how it takes a while for people to realize that they're really not vulnerable in the place where they think they are. And that actually almost anything can be shared with another human being if it's done lovingly and openly. And if the other person makes fun of it or doesn't understand it, that's his or her predicament, not yours. Okay, we're ready for the next phone call.
Hello, Ramdas?
Yeah.
I wonder if you could help me with a difficulty.
Okay.
And
we'll try
seems
to
that my defensiveness, I'm very defensive and fearful of others. And this prevents me from breaking through into any kind of love. I was wondering if you could say a few words about that.
What are you fearful about with regard to others?
Well, when you come, it's very hard for me to communicate to others.
Can you tell me anything about what you're afraid would happen if you really were that open with them?
Well, rejection for one thing, say. This.
Right.
Do you understand?
Yeah, I understand perfectly. See, now the question is, who is it that's rejecting who? That is, if somebody rejects you, say, if somebody rejects me, they say, I don't want to have anything to do with you. The place I'm in my head is I first of all see that who they think they're rejecting isn't who I am anyway. That's the first thing I notice. And the second thing is that by them pushing me away, I see them caught in their own paranoia. and I see their predicament, and I feel compassion for them. So that it all has to do with how I define who I am. And if I'm somebody that's hurtable, then everybody can potentially hurt me. On the other hand, if I'm somebody who is just here, watching the dance of life, including my body and my personality, there's very little anybody can do to me. It's the question of how deep into your center you are about yourself. You know, that is, like, you and I can talk about all of this. You can have these fears and this insecurity, and I can have my whole trip, my personality trip of being wise and knowing, or whatever my trip is. But behind both of these trips, here we are. I mean, you can hear me, I can hear you. We can both look through all of this stuff that you're telling me about you. I could tell you about me. And behind the stuff we are. And slowly you're developing a sense of that. You can feel it even at this moment. Like at this moment you're not fearful. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So whoever you are at this moment isn't the guy you're just talking about. See that one? Mm. And your work now is to get more centered in this place where we always are, so that you can watch your own personality drama with a little less attachment to it. You're just attached in being the guy that's afraid or the guy that's going to be rejected. And we all have that in us. That's the stuff we've gotten from being little children and being socialized in the West. Everybody's got it to a greater or lesser degree. And the technique of getting out of it is just really actively loving other beings, no matter what they do or say to you. And seeing that what they do to say to you is their predicament, not yours. That your work is only just to look for the highest place in them and in yourself and just keep loving them, no matter what happens. My guru says often, people will hate you, just keep loving them. Just keep loving them. They may throw stones at you, just keep loving them. It's always, as long as you're clear about what your action is to be all the time, then a lot of the anxiety dissipates. A lot of anxiety about human relations is you don't know whether to go forward or backward. But if you just got a simple model that your instruction is to love everyone, then if somebody rejects you, imagine what it says about a human being who rejects somebody else who loves them. I mean, how would you like to be in that person? See, that's the predicament, that they're in a tougher place than you are. And especially when you've got just a single model of just loving people. Can you hear any of that?
Yeah.
See, and once you stop being concerned about your personality predicament, but just seeing your job is to serve another human being, then your personality predicament starts to fall by the wayside. See? And it just sort of falls away. It falls off like a snake's skin after a time. I mean, I still have those seeds of paranoia in me. And I can still feel sometimes when I'm meeting somebody new, that little place in me that says, will they like me? Will they accept me? But now I'm quiet enough inside, so I watch that thing happen in me rather than identify with it. It's just sort of like an old habit running off. And behind it all, here we are. And I can hear my guru saying, all you have to do is love everybody. You don't have to make conditional reactions. Even if somebody throws something at you, even if they crucify you, just keep loving him. And loving her. And that's really the secret. The secret is that you create the universe of love by sending it out in every direction all the time. And then if someone can't respond, understand with compassion that that's their predicament, not yours. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Hello?
How do we manifest the love we feel inside into human relationships? I feel the frustration of trying to get it across.
Well, the frustration is due to the fact that you're looking for a reaction from somebody else. You're defining the way in which you feel your love is working by how somebody reacts. And if you see that as your attachment, see, the answer always is work on yourself. So ultimately, you merely become a light. You become an instrument of giving light or giving love. And how it affects other people is their karmic predicament. You can't do anything about anybody else. You throw your bread upon the waters, and you don't do it because you're being a good guy. It's because that's all you can do. You can only be loving. And if I say, well, it's never going to work, nobody's going to receive it, what are you going to do, stop loving people? See, once the love thing started to happen, you look at every being and you see that they're another being, and they are a being that is only, all you can feel is love for them. And later, you stop demanding they be anything in return, that they say, oh, I feel so loved, or thank you for loving me, or I love you too. The game is just not to demand that somebody else do something in return. Just keep giving it. It's falling in love with love, the old song, which had an entirely different meaning, but it's the way it's turning out to be. Okay? Are you
another one to ask you something.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, that was my daughter you were speaking to.
Okay, hello, Mother.
I've been listening to so many people talking about this generation gap. I felt so strongly at one time that I was in that role that, that these young people are talking about. And I knew that it was wrong, and I knew that there had to be, something much stronger, and that we were all just sort of missing each other in the house, people just passing by and not even touching shoulders. And I knew that I was searching, but it took my daughter really to show me how and where. And together now, we have finally begun to see each other, really see each other with eyes, not just not just the roles that we were playing before. And I have young people coming around the house now, and really, when you say you're 42, I'm 42, but I forget who I am, what I am.
Right on,
and
right on.
It's so beautiful, so many things have happened in my life in the past year. And if any of the parents are listening, if any of them think that their kids are crazy, really, I've never been so aware of what it's all about in all my life, and I've known a lot of people my age who couldn't show it to me. And I don't know. I just hope that any of the younger people who are discouraged or disenchanted with what's happening with the older people, just give them a break. Give them the benefit of the doubt, because it can change, and it will change.
It's so good to get to the place where you look at every human being in such a way that it could change, instead of getting them pegged in a slot that doesn't allow them to change through your own models. And every time you have a label like my mother or my daughter or any of these labels, they tend to rigidify the relationship. And the minute you can let go of those, just meet being to being across ages, across economics, across color, across nations, across it all starts fresh again. It's all possible.
I think that wherever we are in the world, it doesn't really matter. We all have our little suburbs, and we all have our housewife role and so on. And if anybody is listening in that particular group, or any group that they think that they're into, there's no such thing as that group. It's just something that we've imagined it to be, and it's not there at all.
I'd love to have a mother like you.
Okay.
Okay.
Ramdas.
Yes.
I became involved in the journey about 2 years ago. I went to India and studied with His Holiness Sakya and was doing psychedelic drugs at the same time.
Yes.
And ended up flipping out and was transported back, put into a hospital in New York.
Right.
For about 6 months.
Okay.
Since that time, I've been and even before that, I've been having a lot of problems in terms of discipline.
Yeah.
When I meditate, it's once in a while. When I do good things, it's once in a while, and when I do fucked up things, it's a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And from what you've been saying, I can draw out of that a sadhana that involves really kind of going on exactly how you're going on, but just doing it with an awareness behind, and not really, not trying, not making efforts, not doing discipline trip at all. Is that compatible with what you've been talking about, with the journey that takes you to realization?
I think that's a beautiful way of asking that whole thing. And it's, again, a matter of the stage you're at and what the pulls are. Like, you worked at a certain stage, you worked very fast and very quickly through drugs and through intense sadhana. And then you were working very fast and quickly through your psychosis or whatever that was that you went through in the hospital. Then there is a period or a stage where you start to, it's in a slight way a reaction against that, but in another way it's an evolution from it, in which you get into a period of your sadhana where you take what you've got in daily life and you just keep working with it and bringing it, as you point out, into more consciousness, and you sort of aim in a certain direction because you couldn't even if you wanted to. I mean, you're just committed to aiming towards becoming awakened or enlightened. And that aim starts to change in a very subtle way all the stuff of the daily life in the marketplace. And it may be that after a period of however long, it may be a month or a year or 10 years, you get to a place where you start to get pulled more and more powerfully, and you feel you need another period of very intense sadhana where you go back into the ashram or the cave or something like that. And I think that if you listen with your heart and realize that no particular form is any better than any other form, only the form that's suitable for you. And like very much for me, a few years ago, I was very deeply involved in very formal sadhana with so many asanas a day, so much pranayama, so much meditation. Now I'm in a very formless kind of sadhana, and
you'll do regular meditation, don't you?
I do some, and sometimes I don't. And everything at times falls away, and I feel like there's nowhere I'm holding on to, and it's very scary. And all I remember at times are the 3 instructions from my guru is love everyone, serve everyone, and remember God. That's all I've got left at times. And then, and I
imagine working with even less than that.
Yeah, I can imagine, but I also can see that over time faith strengthens. And as faith strengthens, you can go under really deep, and you know it's all part of it. It's all part of it, and you can let it all be and know you're going to float back up to the surface. Because even when you get lost in forgetting and getting caught in your melodramas, once this process has happened, the fact that you and I are talking about this at this moment means that it's already happened to you, literally. And now the whole process is just what's called the purification, or the getting it all together. And once you know that, once that faith is imbued in you, then from then on, it doesn't really, then you can take all the ups and downs. It's just more of the training.
Well, that comes into the question of patience.
Yeah, exactly. You're hearing it all fine, I think.
Yeah, but it's so shaky.
Oh, of course. It's designed to, it's always going to push you just as hard as it can, you know. I mean, now you're having to face the absence of external discipline.
Right.
And that's all right, that's good. And you see where your internal discipline isn't, you know, and you see how weak your desire for God is. And you sit there, and here we are. And then it goes on, because if you make believe you're holy, you'll get into a holy scene and act holy because you're in a holy scene. Right. All the seeds are still hanging around in you anyway.
Talk more about that, like another sentence or two, about that getting into the holy trip, wearing beads and cortez.
Yeah, well, we need a lot of external props at certain stages, and then at other stages we dispense with them, and we feel like we're losing something, and then we see that this thing is inside us much deeper than we thought it was. Just when we think we always get hooked on externals, but the thing is that these external forms, whether they're ashrams or beads or whatever they are, sometimes catch us in models of ourselves that are ahead of where we're at. We get ahead with our heads of where we're really evolved to, and we leave these sort of uncooked seeds lurking inside, and then we get to a place where the kind of hypocrisy in the whole thing starts to overwhelm us. And then we start to throw over the traces of external forms and start to bring those two things together. And like when I came back from India last time, I wore all Indian clothes and I stayed by myself a lot. I felt I needed all that stuff. And people like Laura Huxley would say to me, why do you have to wear those clothes? This is not that culture.
Dressing like a mensch now?
Yeah, and I said, well, I needed them. Now here I am in Levi's and, I'm just right here, just, hanging out. Okay? You're a beautiful guy. Your vibrations are lovely, by the way. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
What is your feeling about the relationship between money and spiritual work?
Well, I can answer it best by a delightful thing. I was having a talk with my father, whom I love very dearly, and he heard that I was doing records for a cost. I'm involved with records for cost and trying to lower the price of Be Here Now and not charging, not collecting any personal money for lectures and stuff. And he said to me, what's the matter? Are you against capitalism? And I said, no, I think it's wonderful for you. It just doesn't happen to be my trip at the moment. He says, I don't understand you. So then I got a brainstorm. I said to him, didn't you just try a case for Henry, your brother-in-law? He says, yeah. I said, did you win it? He says, you bet I did. And he says, it was an interesting case. And he went into quite a description of how he had won this case. I said, wow, that's impressive. Did you charge him a big fee? He says, of course not. He's my brother-in-law. I said to him, well, that's my predicament. Everybody's my brother-in-law. That who am I going to charge the big fee to? Who am I going to rip off? Who am I going to treat as them in order to collect certain money? That is, as my spiritual works evolved, I'm looking at the space where everybody's us. I'm living in it. And the economics of a place where everybody's us is entirely different from the economics where it's us against them, or there's them out there. Right? So that I don't think things like about Buddhist livelihood and so on are best done from the level of reading an instruction and then trying to do it out of art. I think the general rule is as you work on yourself and get less and less attached to your own specialness, your economics changes as a result of that, rather than I ought to do this or I ought not to charge. Because a lot of people, I can feel that they're not quite cooked because they'll do a spiritual thing, but they'll do it in such a way that it creates economic hardship on themselves or someone else. And I see that they're creating as much karma by being anti-earning a living as they are from the profit, being anti-profit, that they haven't yet understood right livelihood, which seems to me to be, it's all within the flow, and that people should share the economic burdens for various transmissions and for various products and so on. But the game of getting as much as you can from another person by treating them as an object, that game doesn't hold up as you become more conscious. I think the simple prescription is you keep as much money, or you make as much money, ultimately, as you need to maintain your body, which is the temple for doing the inner work, and for fulfilling your existing responsibilities, which exist on many, many levels, of course, including your responsibility not only to family and country and religion and all those, but also to your own spiritual work. That's also one of your responsibilities. And beyond that, all money's given away. And so with that model in mind, you begin to see how you're using your money, where it's coming from, Is that dealing with your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Bob Ramdas.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Hi.
How does a person living in the spirit deal with external evil?
The way in which it's perceived, first of all, I understand evil as that which increases illusion or paranoia or separateness or separates or increases the multiplicity. and you can really redefine most of your evil terms, and they work in that definition. Good is that which unifies, awakens, brings to consciousness, and relieves human suffering, which is the same thing in a way. I also see that the game is designed perfectly, and that at the level where good exists, so does evil. And this polarity reinforces itself in a way, and it exists at a plane where polarities are. And so that you can look at the act itself and then impose the statement good or evil depending on its function or its effect. And you learn more and more that acts per se are neither good or evil, but rather the attachments of the people that are performing the acts that determine whether they're good or evil. It's not the people that are good or evil, it's the attachments that are good or evil. And behind every evil act is another being, just like you and I. It's just a being who's caught in a karma that's leading them to perform out of their attachments an act which has evil consequences, which is increasing illusion. As far as what do you do about it, you reward and punish good and evil. You recognize both good and evil as existing in the universe. But as you become more conscious, less and less are you able to do things which would be defined as evil. Not because you think you shouldn't do them, because you're afraid of somebody striking you dead, but just because you can't do them because it's too absurd. I mean, if I think you and I are us, instead of you're him or them, how can I steal from you? I don't steal from us. I may steal from them, but I'm not going to steal from us. See? And the predicament is that with increasing consciousness, more and more of the time you're living at the plane where you see us beings hanging out on this earth, on this world, this little round sphere. And less can you think of them as them Vietnamese or them in Washington or anybody, any thems at all, More and more they're just us doing all these weird, far-out things. And those things which limit human freedom and increase illusion, you work to get rid of. And I think ultimately that's the way you deal with good and evil. You do it because that's your incarnation to do it. At the same moment, recognizing that all that exists functionally. Suffering exists, evil exists, wars exist, pestilence, starving. You work full-time to end them all. At the same moment, you know that that's why they're there, because they're supposed to be there. And that's one of the paradoxes that people have the hardest time with. Seeing that it's all perfect and then understanding social responsibility. Okay? And that's the ability, the wisdom to be able to live with two levels of consciousness simultaneously. To work full-time knowing that it's perfect when you began and perfect when you ended. And that your working full-time was perfect too. In the Book of Tokens it says, if you know not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light, you know not me. To me it's obvious there's only one. And all law comes out of that one. And the two comes out of the one. And because two comes out of one, good and evil, or dark and light, or the Prince of Darkness, that's all comes out of the one. And the one is the law. That's the law. That's the first commandment. Thou shalt only love the one. The little bit I've been able to grok or grasp or feel of the universe has always, the law has unfolded in its exquisiteness. And it boggles, of course, the mind, because the mind is merely a little sub-product of this law. And the law isn't logical. The law is full of paradoxes, because it's, quote, the natural law, or the Tao. And so in that sense, it's all perfect. It's all lawful. It's all happening just according to plan, including what we have to do about it. Right? Those are the two levels.
Hello? Oh, yes, hello. I would just like to question Bhagavan Das when he says the common denominator is being. But there are levels of being, and there are some people that you can never strip the roles of hostility. For instance, on the 1st of May of this year, a cousin of mine, a girl, will be spending the 5th year of a 35-year sentence in Texas, in Beaumont, for possession of marijuana. Now, how is she supposed to relate to all the people around me are common beings? I mean, we have being as a common denominator, yes, but all the people around me hate me. Right here and now, when you're faced with hostility, how can you possibly, say we are all one part of a vague being.
I've been reflecting on this a lot in many ways in relation to prisons, for example, in that I carry on a long correspondence with many, many people who are in prison all over the world now, and I would be happy to carry on a correspondence with your sister as well, by the way. I've reflected on the fact that being in prison, especially in a way of being in prison because of cultural mores, like your cousin obviously is, puts a tremendous tax on your ability to get beyond your own melodrama and your own suffering and use it constructively without getting lost in it and lost in your anger and your hurt and your paranoia and your self-pity and all these things.
Yeah, but
wait a minute. Now calm down. Let me talk. Relax, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, right. You do the best you can to relieve the suffering. That is, you do the best you can to get your cousin out of prison.
Yeah, which is nothing.
Okay, now wait a minute. Don't be so reactive. Just hear it all. And for your cousin's work, her work is to use whatever the given conditions are of her life for her to awaken and come to God. Like a lot of my friends who have done long prison terms and who have gotten out, I found them incredibly more conscious than they ever were when they went to prison. Now, I would certainly never send anybody to prison to make them more conscious. But the fact is, they were givens. Like I was recently with Huey Newton, who was put in prison and kept there for some years for supposedly murdering somebody. And he was kept in solitary confinement for a long time. And I meet him now, and I look into his eyes, and there is absolutely a clear, lucid contact with no anger, no nothing. We're just right here. We're not black man and white man. We're nothing. We're just straight. And I say to him, Huey, how'd you get so straight? And he says, well, solitary was the big thing. He said, I was in solitary, and I had to get straight through it. And I see that the worst thing they could do to him became the greatest blessing for him. Now, I would never lay suffering on somebody for that reason. But when somebody is given, the cup of poison or the bitter thing to drink, okay, you work with that. That's the way it's given. And if you get caught in the paranoia that created the problem for you, you're just staying deep in the illusion.
Yeah, but not just the paranoia, but the life is poverty, the life is shit, the life is jail, the life is hostility. I mean, it's very hard. I wonder about the common denominator, I think some people might not have any part of being at all, Because it's impossible when you run into hatred, when you run into people, then you look at them and you realize that there's no way that you can reason with this person as a human being, like a person like that is going to inflict violence on you for no reason. And you come to the conclusion that, this is another human being and maybe he's part of me, but, he's going to kick the shit out of me and there's nothing I can say to him. And what do you do then? I mean, sure you can say, well, I'll try to do my best to alleviate suffering for him and for me, but, right then and now it hurts. Then and there it hurts, I mean,
how much it
people waking up in the ghetto every day for year after year after year after year, being denied, basic dignity. Maybe it's false dignity, but to them it isn't.
Okay. I appreciate the frustration you're experiencing and the hurt you're experiencing about the predicament of man and the paranoia and the suffering man inflicts on man. Your anger and your frustration is reactive. You're reacting to the conditions in such a way that your reaction in a funny way perpetuates it. And your work on yourself is to get yourself into a position where you can see it all dispassionately enough to understand what is the optimum act you can do to relieve human suffering. And if you can take a more dispassionate view of what human suffering is about, you find out that human suffering is part and parcel of philosophical materialism, which is just what you were saying is what most people are caught in. I don't have that attachment because this isn't that, I'm not that caught or identified with my body or my personality or my own particular melodrama. Now, most people are, and for most people, you do the best you can to relieve human suffering. That is, you do the best you can to get your cousin out of jail, to relieve the ghetto situation, to get more conscious politicians. You do all that. But when you examine it from a more conscious point of view yourself, you recognize that the optimum thing you can do is to extricate yourself from the kind of attachments that make you merely a reactive organism in the system. Because then, everybody that goes boo to you, you jump. And the game is finally when somebody goes boo to you, you say, I see you going boo, and here we are. All right?
Right. It's just very, very hard.
Oh, very hard.
In North America, in urban North America.
That's it's called the fire that really burns. It's the fire of the marketplace. See, it's really easy to go off to a cave and get high and, stay so high and beautiful by denying all that.
Right.
But when you stay right in it, right in the marketplace, and work with it, and look people in the eye, and deal with poverty, and deal with greed, and lust, and anger, and impurities, and politicians, and paranoia, and all that stuff, and say, yes, 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 I see it all right, I understand it all, I've got to hear my part in it, and do it purely and with love. That's the work. That's the fiercest work. It's the fiercest fire we can stand in. Right? Okay, I love you. You're a beautiful guy. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Send my love to your cousin, will you?
I will.
And if she wants to, she can send me a note through this radio station. It'll get to me.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Right.
I can understand to some extent that we have models of the world and the universe and how we, think it ought to be. And to some extent, I understand that we're born into certain situations for reasons, But the thing that I can't quite bridge, this gap, from this sort of slight understanding, is the suffering that goes on in the world. Just sometimes mass suffering that goes in places like Biafra and Bangladesh.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I used to sit in India at the feet of my guru, and he'd say, feed everybody. Tell everybody to feed. And he'd say, look how we're feeding everybody. And everybody that would come to the temple would get a bag of food or a box of food. And I would be sitting there realizing that this man had incredible powers, and that not 200 miles away was Bangladesh, in which hundreds of thousands of people were starving to death that day, And he wasn't appearing to do anything about it. And I either had a choice of saying, well, he's really a man of very limited something, or very phony, or he's just busy here, or he's just putting on a show of being concerned, or another thought was he's doing it all at another level, or another thought maybe it's not supposed to be done. That one really freaked me, see, that maybe it was right the way it was happening in Bangladesh, see, and that one I couldn't handle personally because it was too ugly in my own eyes, and that's really what the reading from the third Chinese patriarch is about. When you're attached to this versus that, or right versus wrong, or living versus dying, you can't understand why he's sitting there feeding us and not feeding the people in Bangladesh. It's only when you yourself are not attached to death, to the avoidance of death, that you can even hear how the laws of the universe could work, because Maharaji keeps saying, don't you understand it's all perfect? And that's a hard one for me. And I say, Biafra is perfect, Bangladesh is perfect. But I've got to realize that the perfection is not only in the Bangladesh or Biafra, but it's in the reactions it has on everybody else in the world, and on the total warp and woof of things, my own confusion and revulsion and attraction and awe at the awful nature of the divine law that would allow that to exist, that it'd be perfect, right? Now, I live much more deeply now in theories, in the intuitive feeling about reincarnation. Not necessarily historical reincarnation, but the idea that an entity goes on and on and on, and that a human birth, this particular human birth, is but a flick. And because of that, that changes the meaning of a death for a person. Now, I can imagine a million people, a million beings needing to take a birth in which they live a very short time, and they live in a holy area, and they do a certain kind of simple work, right? And they all say, well, let's take birth as in Bangladesh, which is then East Pakistan, because there'll be a war there, and we'll all get wiped out and get done with that one quick, right? I mean, see, that's a far-out one, see, because it's scary to do those flip-arounds and to consider a meta-system in which the whole thing looks reversed, in which somebody who got off, like a baby dies at 2, and you say, "Well, you lucky." Not, "Oh, the poor little tyke, it didn't have a chance to live." That depends on what vantage point you're looking at it from. That's why the Bible has the Old Testament has such a terrible time with interpreting who God is. And the whole story of Job. I mean, like, how can you do this? If you're such a just God, what are you being such an angry God for, right? And that's all of what the Shiva force is about in India. And the forces of decay and destruction. First of all, this physical plane seems to involve suffering. That's Buddha's first noble truth, right on. It seems to involve, everything has an element of suffering. Everything that's in time has an element of suffering because of change or decay involved in it. And then Christ's statement, "Don't lay up your treasures where moth and rust doth corrupt and where thieves steal in," which means don't get stuck in the physical plane in time where as Buddha said, it's all suffering. I mean, that's if Christ and Buddha were talking together, right? Then the next thing is that as you become more conscious, you realize the bodhisattva vow. You recognize that we are all totally interrelated and that you're working to end all suffering, because that's the way of enlightenment. And you begin to see it. The way I see it is that a conscious being understands that man's role in the entire dance is to relieve human suffering. That becomes your function. Once you understand the conscious function of a human being, a fully human being. And he relieves human suffering, not because it's good to do it, but because that's what he does. Just like a garbage truck, you pick up garbage with it, not because the garbage truck thinks it's good to pick up garbage, it's just what it does. And so you don't fulfill social responsibility out of a sense of ought or should or fear. You do it because that's what you do. Does that deal with your question? That's beautiful.
Hello?
Hello.
You said tonight that your guru said that, one, it was important to serve, to love people, and the last one was?
To remember God.
To remember God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know it's a question that's hard to answer just like that, but how does one get to that point? Could you talk about it a little?
Well, the first way you get to it is by asking the question you just asked. That, in fact, what you're really handed are 3 statements which you grow into in time. So you take them at whatever level they mean something to you, and you work with them. And then as you work with them, a new level dawns, and a new level dawns. It's just a way of starting to think about your daily life. So that when you meet people, you see, it's like I'm sitting on a Greyhound bus and reading, and a guy sits down next to me, and he's taking more of the seat, and he's overweight, and he's kind of sweaty, and I start to pull back a little bit, and then he says, "You going to Santa Fe?" And I'm about to give one of these short answers, "Yep," and then go back to my book as if sort of don't bother me, and I hear my guru saying, "Love everyone, serve everyone, and remember God." And the remember God does it to me. I think, well, this is God who's come to me as a teaching. I mean, am I caught in my attachment to what that makes me turn off this being? And so at that point I put down the book and I say, yeah, I am going to Santa Fe. Where are you going? And I realized that my work at that moment is to find in every human being that which is the God in her or him. So that becomes part of my work, and then I have to deal with serve. Somebody asks me to do something, and they're asking me out of a very kind of worldly desire on their part, and I say, well, am I supposed to fulfill that? Is that what serve means? Does it mean do anything anybody wants me to do? Or is it to serve the God in each human being? And sometimes I can say no to somebody and I understand that I'm serving them. And I have to wrestle with that all the time. What is service? What's the purest service? Who are you serving? You can't serve man and God at the same moment. And so you're listening to how you can serve the God in every human being, not necessarily the worldly illusion that each person is caught in. But that's a very subtle thing, and that's why these 3 instructions are so beautiful, because they keep you working all the time to understand what they mean. And so you're asking the question, is the work on them? Can you hear all that?
Oh, yes, I hear it.
Yeah, I'm hearing it too, as if for the first time. It's beautiful. It's fun. I'm glad you asked that. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.